gonna sue somebody.
It's not quite spooky time just yet, but I have the perfect project to get myself in the mood for the fast approaching season. Today I'm going to make an air blaster effect for a haunted house out of this. And these things. And probably some of that. This tank is a great size to use as a reserve for compressed air for this effect. The reserve tank is what gives the air blaster the punch needed for an effective scare. Well, I'm not going to need that. To get started, I'm going to remove all the components that come attached to the air tank. That wasn't too hard. With that done, I'm going to lay out all my components to make sure that I have everything I need before I get started. This is a heavy-duty 12-volt solenoid air valve that fits half-inch pipe. I wanted a valve that has a bigger opening so that a large amount of air will pass through it when it opens. I also added a ball valve as a safety measure. I can never be too careful when working with compressed air. Looks like everything's here. Now it's time to start assembling everything. I started by wrapping the fittings with Teflon tape so that everything will be airtight and there won't be any leaks. Later, I also used some Loctite on a few of the fittings. Honestly, this was a bit of a puzzle to figure out. I wanted all of the fittings to have a specific orientation when sticking out of the opening in the tank. Unfortunately, the handle on the tank got in the way of being able to turn everything the way that I needed to. But eventually, I figured it out. So bear with me, I felt that it was worth showing my trial and error process because I don't always get everything right on the first go. Even though I could edit the video to appear that I did get everything right the first time, I don't feel like it would be an honest representation of how things went for me when working on a project. Case in point, right here, I needed this extra long piece of pipe to get enough leverage to tighten everything properly. I didn't feel like it'd be a good idea to put that kind of torque on the solenoid by hand because I'd run the risk of damaging it. It turns out that the valve is directional. Who knew? I also realized that I would first need to fully tighten the valve to the T in the orientation that I wanted before assembling it onto the tank. I ended up fussing with this for a bit. I'll catch up with everyone when I get to the next part. Now that I got that all squared away, I'll move on to adding this reducer that converts the larger size pipe to the size needed for the ball valve. The red stuff is the Loctite that I mentioned earlier. Next up, I'm going to add the ball valve. And my wrench got stuck. I got the wrench unstuck, but it loosened up the connection between the T and the tank. With the ball valve in place, next I'm going to install another reducer that will allow me to fit the air hose quick connector. This quick connector will allow me to connect the tank of my air blaster to the tank of my air compressor. Looks pretty good to me. Time to finish up the other half of the fittings. This barbed hose fitting will allow me to attach a rubber hose to the tank. That way, the air blaster tank doesn't have to be right next to where the air comes out. This grants me the flexibility to have air coming out of a thin wall panel or out of small props without having to figure out a way to hide an air tank inside the wall or prop. Next, I feed a hose clamp over the barb fitting with the rubber hose and tighten it up. Now it's time to wire up and reassemble the solenoid. This part is fairly straightforward. I open it up and prepare some wires for the positive and negative leads. Next, I insert the wires and tighten down the set screw. Then I feed the wire through and put it back together. Next, I place the solenoid back on the valve and tighten it down. Lastly, I add a connector to the end of the wires so I can plug it into a control box. There it is, ready to scare the bejesus out of tons of unsuspecting haunt guests. By far one of the best low-cost scares I had at my event. With the build of the air blaster done, I'm going to quickly make a button so I can demonstrate it for the video. For this I'll need a 12-volt wall adapter, a normally open press button, some extra wire, and a few other bits. When power is put to the solenoid, it opens the valve, releasing the air. So to make this circuit, I just need to wire the button in series with the solenoid. Basically, I want to have a way to make a break in the circuit that I can momentarily complete by pushing the button. Now that I have my button assembled, I'm going to wire it together with the wall adapter and the air blaster. I didn't solder anything together for this project because the use of this button is just temporary, so I can show how the air blaster works. I used heat shrink on the wire connections to hold everything together and to keep the bare wires from touching and shorting out. All that's left is to connect up some air and see how it works. No air leaks detected, so that's good. Success! Before I do my wrap up, I want to express that these air blasters can be dangerous if used improperly. I always use mine with safety in mind. I do not condone or encourage the use of this effect outside of the scope of this demonstration. If you do something that results in injury or even death, that is the result of your own actions or choices. I am not responsible for your stupidity. And here it is. For an effect that is around $100 a build, I love using these things in my haunt. When set up with a motion detector or a beam sensor, they were always a guaranteed scare. The golden rule of a haunt is always, you don't touch the actors won't touch you. The great part about air blasters is that the air that comes out of them can touch the guests. That interaction is always startling for a guest that doesn't know that these effects are in the show. I have quite a few ideas that I want to do that utilize these air blasters, as well as I might be upgrading some old projects to include one. That means that the air blaster from this project will be making appearances in future videos. Happy haunting, and I'll see you next time. As always, thanks for watching.